Okay, let's get one thing straight. Running backs don't matter.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Even if it's an extremely efficient rusher, he should never get paid. That goes for really every running back. It's the one position in football that a team shouldn't pay a lot for or use a lot of draft capital on at all. The actual role does matter, but who serves that role really doesn't. It's the most replaceable player in the sport, and it's easy to find a good running back on the spot. When it comes to a rushing attack, the player with the ball is the least important. What does matter is how good the offensive line is, and if they're creating good holes for the back, or if there's a mobile quarterback that's making the defensive stay honest. Running back is a position based on team effort. Look at the highest paid backs in the league, and compare that to how good their teams were in 2021. Not great. There are so many examples of a running back that was looked at as a star who disappeared and their backup came in and just dominated. D'Ernest Johnson is perhaps the best example of this. Nick Chubb is a beast, right? Kareem Hunt is one hell of a good backup. Also, so I've heard, pretty damn good kicker too. Damn it, Darren, why the hell did you say that? You're canceled now. Congratulations. Now, what would happen if they both theoretically got hurt? Well, a guy like Johnson, who was playing in the AAF not long ago, gets to suit up and make his first career start. And how did he do? Johnson rushed for 146 yards and a touchdown. Turns out, it's helpful when you're behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Remember before Kareem Hunt kicked a girl in an elevator and he was in Kansas City? The Chiefs had Spencer Ware, who was tearing it up but tore his PCL. Hunt took over and dominated. And once he got released, Damian Williams took over and was a beast and helped the Chiefs win a Super Bowl. It's almost like it was more about the team and not who was running. When Todd Gurley went down in 2018, CJ Anderson, a fat veteran, took over. Hey, don't cancel me. He called himself fat. Relax. In 2 games, yes, just 2, he had 300 yards. Everybody remembers Le'Veon Bell. He was a star with the Steelers. Bell had 1,200 yards in 3 of 4 seasons, and after his rookie season, had at least 4 yards per carry every year in Pittsburgh. Well, after 2 straight seasons of playing on the franchise tag, he decided to hold out. He was considered a top 5 player in the league on the top 100 players of 2018. Surely, the Steelers wouldn't even lose a step without him. Enter James Conner, a random 3rd-round selection out of Pitt. Conner had 4.5 yards per carry, a half yard more than Bell had the year prior, and had almost 1,000 yards in 13 games. Bell got signed to a massive $52.5 million deal with the Jets and was released a year and a half later. He only had 3.2 yards per carry in his first year in New York. Just awful. It's almost like the really good Steelers offensive line, kind of mattered. All of a sudden, Bell couldn't find a hole. Hey, maybe he should have just asked Deshaun Watson. Seems like he knows a thing or two about finding a hole or making people find a hole for him. Ugh. The next offseason, there were 2 holdouts. Let's start with Melvin Gordon. Gordon was coming off of 3 straight years with over 1,400 yards from scrimmage, being used a lot in the pass game as well. He held out in hopes of a new deal, and, well, it only lasted 4 weeks. In those 4 weeks, backup Austin Eckler took over primary duties and had over 100 yards from scrimmage in 3 of 4 games. I imagine that Gordon realized that he was screwed and he decided to return. He did end up getting $8 million a year by the Broncos and had back-to-back 900-plus yard seasons. Good for him. Eckler, who was quite literally an undrafted free agent out of a Division II school, yes, Division II, had over 1,500 yards from scrimmage in 2019 and had over 1,600 yards in 2021. Gordon was undeniably replaceable. So was the other guy who held out and, unlike Gordon, successfully got his bag, Ezekiel Elliott. Through the first 3 years of Zeke's career, he had over 4,000 rushing yards. He was an absolute stud for Dallas, and once they picked up his 5th-year option, he decided to hold out. Finally, Jerry Jones caved. Zeke got a $90 million deal over 6 years. His numbers do look great since, about 3,300 yards. But let's take a look at his backup, Tony Pollard, only making about $1.1 million this season. In 2021, Zeke had 4.2 yards per carry. Pollard had 5.5. In 2020, Zeke had 4 yards per carry. Pollard, 4.3. Even in 2019, after Zeke's holdout, he had 4.5 yards per carry. But Pollard, he had 5.3. Pollard is faster, has a better skill set, and has outperformed Zeke on a carry-to-carry base. Looking back, Dallas surely regrets caving. It's not much of a surprise that the running back position gets absolutely beaten and battered regularly. It's a position that requires a ton of durability, but even the most normally healthy backs get hurt. And for Todd Gurley, that's what essentially ended his career, unless he makes a surprising return. Over the first 5 years of his career with the Rams, Gurley had over 5,400 rushing yards, 2,090 receiving yards, and 70 total touchdowns. At the time, in 2018, he was well worth that $60 million extension LA gave him, making him the highest paid running back in NFL history. Turns out, while Gurley was dominating and winning both Offensive Rookie of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year 2 seasons later, he was also dealing with arthritis in his knee that turned out to be his demise. The Rams released him after 2019, and he hasn't even been back in the league since 2020. Stop me if I sound like a broken record, but don't pay running backs. Unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey's fate is heading in the same direction. After he was drafted in the first round by Carolina, McCaffrey had over 2,400 rushing yards, 2,500 receiving yards, and 39 touchdowns. The dude was a beast. That was until a few injuries have popped up. In 2020, he got a shiny new 4-year, $64 million extension, making him the new highest paid running back in NFL history. And since, well, he's played in 10 games. He suffered an ankle sprain and landed on injured reserve, and then came back and suffered a shoulder injury that ended his season. In 2021, he suffered a hamstring injury, landed on injured reserve, and even after coming back, suffered an ankle injury that ended his season. Now don't get me wrong, he's a great player. Hell, all these backs are. But he hasn't even been on the field much over the last 2 years. When I say that running backs shouldn't get paid, I mean that for all running backs, even the best, because at one time, these now bad contracts were once the best backs in the league. But eventually, they'll suffer the same fate, just like Derrick Henry will. No doubt King Henry has been a monster at times. Shit, he had over 3,500 yards and 33 touchdowns in just a 2-year span, with an Offensive Player of the Year award along the way. But last season, Henry injured his foot and missed 9 games. Yeah, I think injuries are going to drag him down eventually, especially with the usage he gets in Tennessee. But the big thing here was how the Titans were without Henry. For starters, Tennessee went 6-2 with him and 6-3 without him. Not really much of a change. Over the 8 games the Titans had Henry in the lineup, he had 117 rushing yards per game. Over the rest of the year without Henry, Tennessee had 135 rushing yards per game. More importantly, Mike Vrabel didn't even change the way the offense ran. Ryan Tannehill didn't just start throwing the ball more. The Titans did what they did with Henry: run the ball, run the clock, and hope Tannehill's dumbass didn't lose the game for them. The by-committee running back approach is getting more and more popular, and for good reason. Why pay one guy a bunch of money when you're just gonna use him too much and get him hurt or gas him? It's just easier to find a few guys, barely pay them, or draft them late in the draft and cycle them through. Yeah, it sucks for those guys at the position, but at the end of the day, the NFL is a business, and this is the direction the league is heading in. So what we really mean to say is, oh shit, fuck running backs.